This is Craig DeLarge, and I'm putting together this video to give you a quick run through of the talk that I did at AnxietyTech on August the 23rd, 2019 in New York related to mental health wearables. So very quickly, just a bit about myself. I'm the founder of the Digital Mental Health Project and a former board member of a local chapter of the National Alliance of Mental Illness here in Philadelphia. Career-wise, I've spent many years as a digital health strategist and healthcare marketer in a number of different global pharmaceutical companies. I'm also a coach and professor. I have a background educationally in business, and I'm currently working on my master's in public health. And from a fun fact standpoint, love to ride electric unicycles and am also a collector of MentalTech wearables. From an agenda standpoint, today we're going to talk a little bit about the Digital Mental Health Project, then get into a discussion of wearables, defining what they are, dimensions for categorizing them, roles they play, applications we see in the marketplace, and some concluding insights that I think will be helpful to you. From an expectation standpoint, note that this is not a census of the wearables offerings in the market, but rather a sample representation. We're not here to describe or rate what is best. These views are my own, and these are not recommendations or endorsements, but observations. So, the Digital Mental Health Project, just to speak quickly here, is a consultancy that I work on with my wife that really brings together my occupational role as a digital health strategist and my vocational role as a mental health advocate and caregiver. In this consultancy, we are out to develop educational experiences that enable a responsible adoption of mental tech. And the work that we do takes the forms of talks, workshops, a literacy series that we're working on right now, and advisory and research services. Now, if we take an overview look of mental tech, you can see that there are applications that span across the care continuum for both healthcare and social care. What we describe as prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and maintenance. And understand that mental health wearables constitute a subcategory of the different technologies that you see listed here that exist in each of these four areas. Now, you notice earlier we talked about the idea that in the Digital Mental Health Project, our goal is to develop educational experiences that enable a responsible adoption of mental tech. The reason we emphasize responsible adoption is because there are four areas where there needs to be continuous accountability by leaders on the part of this particular industry sector as it emerges. Those happen to be stigma and discrimination, which, if not managed well, keep people who are in need of these technologies from raising their hands to use them. There's clinical efficacy, which is accountability around making sure that the claims that are made by the companies in this sector are in fact tested and true. Then privacy has to do with data security, and this is really important as there will always be the temptation for the business models in this space to use data as a basis for monetization. And where there's a basis for monetization, there's the potential for abuse. And then the digital divide is about making sure that the solutions that are developed in a way that there is access for those that are in the middle to lower socioeconomic ranks of society who are also in great use of these technologies and can benefit from them. Now, let's talk about mental health wearables. So generally, mental health wearables are a subcategory of consumer and clinical wearables as well as mental tech. They are those wearables that are developed expressly for the purposes of addressing mental wellness at one end of a spectrum and mental disorder and illness at another. Generally, these technologies are developed to act as biometric sensors that pick up information generated by our bodies, as well as dispensers of energy, where you have neurostimulation services and solutions in this space that administer treatment by sending energy into the brain as well as into the nervous system. So now, I like to take it aside to talk about this idea that the body is energy, and as such emits energy waves that can be both read and written upon. And when you look at this space, what we've illustrated here are a number of what I call mechanisms of sensing that different wearables exist to read and then create insight or information that then is beneficial and applicable in we keeping up our wellness as well as in healing sickness. And so you can see that brainwaves can be read and stimulated. Eyesight and eye stimulation. There's technologies that, wearable technologies that do that. Detection of sweat or skin galvanic response, or galvanic skin response. Even the quality of our voices and how we breathe can give insight into our mental states. There's heart rate and heart rate variability, which are measures of stress. The sounds of our organs, I think particularly in the gut, we see applications that are looking at how these can be used as biometrics. Then there's bodily motion, heat levels in the body, as well as bodily posture that give us insight into mental, emotional, and psychological states. And then gait analysis, where we know from research that people who tend towards depression will take shorter and slower steps. And there are also applications here in the neurological area. And then it's important to remember that with all these different types of detection, when they're interpreted, it's important to take into consideration that they work in the context of individual biology, behavior, both individual and group, and then, of course, the social context within which any individual or group exists. So now, having taken a measure of the different sensing mechanisms that various wearables use, let's start now to dive into the role that wearables play within mental tech. So when we think about mental tech, there are 5 general categories that we think about. And there are other researchers out there that have used different categorizations which are also valid, but this is the one that we like. So we have teletherapy, which is about using telephonics and video conferencing to connect treaters and clients over time and space, both synchronously and asynchronously. Mobile apps that deliver various types of behavioral therapies and other therapies, and that collect the data from those interactions and help us to come up with various types of insights that are beneficial to health and wellness. We have mixed reality, so immersive alternative realities that we call virtual, as well as assisted realities that we call augmented, that are used to deliver exposure, reminiscent meditation therapies, among others. And then we have care and wellness platforms that are software and networks that collect and store information, derive insights, and that facilitate and monitor care, increasing the line of sight across various care silos that exist within health and social care. Where here I like to pause to help us remember that one of the things that is unique about mental and behavioral care that separates it from physical care is that in addition to the typical triad of doctor, patient, and payer, in the mental health area, there's the addition of social care, education, the law enforcement and penal systems, and also communities of faith that have to be taken into consideration. And then finally, data and algorithms, which are the information and formulas that underpin these 4 categories we see above, and that really are the brains and the communication that help us to derive even greater insight and benefit from these technologies. So now, we see that wearables cut across all 5 of these categories because you can find wearables that actually complement and improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of all of these different mental tech categories. And how wearables contribute is really around three essential roles: the capturing of biometrics, the delivery of therapies of various types, chiefly cognitive behavioral, exposure, and reminiscence therapy, and then insight delivery as a result of the information that is collected, combined, analyzed, resulting in insights that we would not otherwise be able to derive and enjoy. So now, let's make a run through of mental health wearables in terms of their dimensions and applications. So, being a master of business administration, I couldn't resist using a cube or a collection of different matrices in order to think about this particular category. There are three dimensions that I like to use in looking at this space. One is mental tech wearables in terms of the disorder states that they are developed for, in terms of the sensing mechanisms that they use as a part of their technology, and then the various forms that they take, which you can see run the gamut from handhelds. Many people don't think of their smartphones as a wearable, but if you carry it around all the time, trust me, you're wearing it. We have headbands, wristbands, glasses and lenses, sensor shirts, adhesives and clips, shoes, and then cameras, which we think of as observables, going beyond wearables. So now, let's take a look at the dimensions of sensing mechanism cross-sected with forms. Here, and I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but I've kind of illustrated for you the various sensing mechanisms down the side and then the different forms across the top. And you can see that there is a good variety of offerings that cross-sect these various spaces. You can see that handhelds, mostly smartphones, and head and wristbands really rule in terms of the greatest representation, but that there are also novel outliers that will continue to grow over time, I believe, in the form of glasses, shirts, adhesives, shoes, observable cameras, and even ingestible pills. For any of you that might be familiar with the Abilify MySite developed by Otsuka Pharma and Proteus Health, which puts a sensor in a pill that actually tracks how the pill is taken and how it acts within the body. Now, let's take a look at how sensing mechanisms cross-sect with various disorders. So here, I've done a cross-section, and there are two tables here where you see the sensing mechanism cross-sected against the major mental disorders that we focus on in our society. And then I've kind of put in where they cross-sect the various form that they take. And so you see that it's not just mental health, but these wearables and their various sensing mechanisms and forms extend even into behavioral health and neurology. So some of the insights we can take away from this is we see how depression and anxiety has the most offerings, and I kind of group bipolar with depression, as depression is one extreme of bipolar across from mania. And I have a certain theory around why there is such a cluster of offerings within depression and anxiety. So I tend to believe that where there's less stigma, and I think we can look at the press and see that we've gotten more comfortable with anxiety and depression than many of the other forms of mental distress and disorder, which has lessened stigma relatively. But where there's less stigma, there's more funding. Where there's more funding, there's more R&D. And where there's more R&D, there's more offerings. And so may it be that this particular trend continues to spread beyond these two into additional categories of mental disorder. And you can see that the applications run the gamut from electronic encephalograms, consumer and clinical grade, to nerve stimulation, to breath rate monitoring, heart rate variability, galvanic skin response, and gait detection. And these are examples of companies that have offerings in these particular spaces. So now, I'm going to do a quick run through of different types of applications that we see. So virtual reality, a number of applications here. You see this as a rather crowded field, and this is not even all of the companies that have offerings, is really aiding anxiety, trauma, psychosis, and dementia. Chiefly through, as I'd said earlier, the administration of exposure therapy, which puts the traumatized individual repeatedly back into the situation where they were traumatized so that they can reprocess it. We also see applications with psychosis, helping people with psychosis and schizophrenia, using virtual reality scenarios to manage the hallucinations that they're having. And then in dementia, reminiscence therapy is really about helping those that suffer with dementia to recall memory from their distant past. And so this is a good application space. Here I just wanted to show you very quickly kind of a bit of an overview. We get this illustration from Science Virtual Reality, or Science Health, I should say, of how this works. So you have the client that wears the goggles, that has a connection to the cloud so that the therapist can actually look over the shoulder into the reality that the client is experiencing. And then these companies tend to have a library of different modules that the therapist can use with their client. And so you've got modules that run the gamut from fear of flying, fear of snakes and spiders, war zones, fear of heights, and so forth and so on, that have been used with quite good effect, and there's good research around these particular applications. Now moving on, we look at ADHD. I love this offering from Narbis, which is a combination EEG and lenses that measure the brain waves associated with concentration. And when you lose focus or concentration, the lenses actually shut off so that you can't see what you're looking at, which then trains you to refocus your attention so that you can get your vision through the lenses back. I'm looking forward to getting a pair of these at some point, but I think it's a quite cool and novel application. Then when we look at breath and voice, so I'm actually a user of the Spire Stone. They also make a health tag now that adhesively fits within your clothing. And I love this device because what it does is it measures in real time the expansion and contraction of your waistline. And as a result of that measurement, will vibrate to let you know if you're hyperventilating or underventilating. So I've actually come to understand that when I become anxious, I have a habit of holding my breath. And so the Spire has been very helpful to me in that regard. And then we have a whole category of voice algorithms that actually can work through any device that detects or captures voice in order to give a sense of what a person's mental, emotional, and psychological state is, just based on changes and differences in their voice and voice quality. Next, we have shirts and bands that are being used in the obsessive compulsive behavior area as well as anxiety detection. So these exoskins have a whole bunch of different types of sensors, from breath, the sweat, heart, and they'll be building even other additional types of sensors into them that when you wear them, allow this ability to track and alert not only you, but your care team to various changes that might be happening in your physicality. Habit Aware is a band that has an accelerometer in it that actually looks at the positioning of your wrists. So for people that have obsessive compulsive behaviors like picking their hair, scratching their face, picking their nose, or pulling on their ears, or just the gesture that goes with smoking. This band will look at the positioning of your limbs and then detect or alert you to the fact that you need to be aware of that and stop doing it. Now, brain power, I love. This is assistive visual recognition. This is helping children with autism. Essentially, what it's doing is it's using Google Glass and the forward camera to read the facial expressions of individuals and then to communicate to the child verbally through the earpiece how they need to associate that facial expression with the given emotion and how they need to respond to it. This is critical because we know that recognition of emotion and a facial expression is a deficit or barrier for children on the autism scale. And so this is a fabulous application of a wearable using Google Glass. Then we have eye control keyboards. So for people who have ALS, there's a phenomenon called locked-in syndrome where their bodies have shut down and the only movement that they have is via their eyes. And so eye control is a great application that is actually allowing people with locked-in syndrome to interact through eye motion with this keyboard that hangs in front of their faces, and as a result, to communicate both verbally and through typed expression to those that are around them. We then have blue light therapy, and I actually own one of these IOs going back to when I used to travel back and forth to Asia a lot. This blue light therapy is actually a stimulator now that aids insomnia and jet lag. You put these glasses on, and what it does is it sends blue light into your cornea and retina, which then has an impact on centers of your brain that are related to your circadian rhythm. Next, we have sensors and stimulants that actually aid opioid and nicotine addiction. So the NSS2 bridge, which I understand is just recently approved by FDA, is actually an adhesive that has two stimulators that go into your skin and actually sends a charge to a center of the brain where opioid craving exists and overrides that craving in real time. And then the carrot is a breathalyzer that actually helps people with nicotine addiction to measure the rates of craving and use that is happening with themselves, and as a result to be able to retrain themselves around their respective addiction. Then galvanics that look at levels of sweat or electrical activity in the skin is being used to actually aid the detection of seizures. And as a result is saving many of the head trauma and potential of swallowing the tongue that occur when seizures happen without one being able to prepare for it. We even see gait analysis, which looks at how one walks or the changes in how one walks and how that can denote or signal various emotional states. So now, let me talk about or give some concluding insights. So, because I knew that the audience at AnxietyTech was going to be largely product developers and user experience professionals, these are some thoughts that I have related to that and where there's opportunity for these particular types of professionals. So understand one, usability comes up pretty consistently as a top barrier for sustained use of MentalTech. So in this space, which up to this point has been more executed by technologists than by user experience professionals, there's a great need for improvement in the next generation of MentalTech that's going to be launching in this area. The next is taking care that we have customer user experiences that are integrated with the care pathways that professionals use, as well as the lifestyle pathways of the consumers that use these technologies is really critical and important. Making sure that wearables are comfortable is really critical. But I can tell you as a user of them that they're not always very comfortable to use, and so there's the potential for continued improvement there. Then the login and the Bluetooth connection experiences of many wearables can be a real pain and a barrier to the sustained use of them. So as professionals in this space, there's an opportunity for you. Then, as I said earlier, paying attention to the digital divide, and then also helping the companies and clients that you work with to really be accountable around privacy so that they can compete on that basis. Where, much like we've had the simplification of food labels, there's a real opportunity for the simplification of privacy labels also. Now, the opportunities that we can see looking forward in this space. Digital phenotypes as objective diagnostics for mental health. The further development of passive and ambient sensing, observables that look at voice, cameras that look at body motion, and even tattoos that are more ambient because they go on your skin and you don't have to remember to put them on when you get up in the morning. There are opportunities for looking for increased education and literacy, something that we're working on in particular, as well as differentiation because it is such a crowded space. And then that privacy point, I know I keep bringing it up, but I'll bring it up again. Then there's a need for ongoing accountability around efficacy and security. And I mentioned earlier about the opportunity for simplified privacy labels. And then interoperability and APIs that allow more and more of these point solutions, which any wearable is, to work better with platforms. And so how can we continue to contribute in this space? Well, grow your literacy, which this talk is a start or a further progression along that path for you. Work to address barriers and stigma. Be and hold others accountable around evidence efficacy and data security. And please, by all means, participate in the Digital Mental Health Project's Digital Stress Management Survey, where we're looking to grow the sample of this survey as an indicator of levels of awareness and use of these technologies on an ongoing basis. And when you take the survey, I'll be sure to share the results with you. So don't hesitate to call me, or this number you see here, 267-367-9867. You can reach me through WhatsApp, which I love to use on a regular basis, or to send me an email if you have any questions or want to take up any discussions around this topic forward looking. And so thank you very much for your time and attention. Be well. Bye-bye.